Late one autumn evening, a group of college friends gathered in a dimly lit dorm room. The air was thick with the scent of burned popcorn and stale beer. They were restless, eager for something more thrilling than their usual weekend routine. That's when Jordan, the self-proclaimed paranormal enthusiast, pulled a dusty Ouija board from his backpack. "I found this at a thrift shop," he said, grinning mischievously. "Thought we could summon a little fun." The group hesitated. Madison, the skeptic, rolled her eyes. "It's just a game. Let's get it over with." The others, emboldened by her dismissal, circled the board. The only light came from a flickering candle on the coffee table. Jordan placed the planchette in the center and invited everyone to place their fingers on it. "Is anyone here with us?" he asked, his voice dripping with mock seriousness. For a long moment, nothing happened. The group chuckled nervously, accusing each other of trying to move the planchette. Then, just as they were about to give up, the pointer jerked to life. J-O-E. Joe? Madison laughed, though her voice was unsteady. "Is this supposed to scare us?" But the planchette kept moving, spelling out D-O-N-T-L-E-A-V-E. "Don't leave," Sarah whispered, her face pale. "Who are you?" Jordan asked, suddenly serious. The response came swiftly. H-E-L-P-M-E. The group exchanged uneasy glances. Jordan pressed on. "What do you need help with?" B-U-R-I-E-D. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet. Sarah shivered, pulling her hoodie tighter around her. "Guys, this isn't funny anymore." "No one's laughing," Jordan muttered. He stared at the board, his bravado slipping. "Where are you buried?" The planchette moved slowly, as if the spirit hesitated. B-A-C-K-Y-A-R-D. The group fell silent. This wasn't their backyard, but the house Jordan had grown up in wasn't far from campus. His backyard had always been an eerie place, overgrown with weeds and overshadowed by gnarled trees. "This is ridiculous," Madison said, standing abruptly. "You're all letting your imaginations run wild." "Let's just finish," Jordan said, his tone strained. "What's your name?" K-R-E-N. Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Jordan, wasn't there a girl named Karen who went missing years ago, near your neighborhood?" Jordan nodded slowly, his face pale. "Yeah, she was in my sister's grade, disappeared without a trace." The group stared at him, the weight of the revelation settling over them. "Okay, that's enough," Madison said, trying to sound authoritative. "We're done here." But as she reached for the planchette to move it to goodbye, the board seemed to fight against her. The pointer shot to a new word, S-T-A-Y. "Nope," Sarah said, shaking her head furiously. "We're done. Goodbye." The candle flickered violently, and the planchette began to move without anyone touching it. It spelled D-O-N-T-L-E-A-E-E-M-E. Panic set in. The group scrambled away from the table, leaving the board untouched. The candle extinguished itself, plunging the room into darkness. And then they heard it, a faint knocking sound coming from the closet. "Jordan," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling, "tell me you're not messing with us." "I'm not," he whispered back. The knocking grew louder, more insistent. Madison, trying to be brave, grabbed her phone and turned on the flashlight. She crept toward the closet, the others holding their breath. As she opened the door, the knocking stopped. Inside was nothing but a pile of coats and a broken vacuum cleaner. Relief washed over them, but it was short-lived. From behind them came a sound like nails scratching against wood. They spun around to see the Ouija board vibrating on the table, the planchette moving erratically. B-A-K-Y-A-A-R-D. B-A-C-K-Y-A-R-D. Jordan's face was ashen. "We need to stop this." "We don't know how," Sarah cried. "Just break it," Madison shouted. But as Jordan reached for the board, a deafening crash filled the room. The candle holder flew off the table, shattering against the wall. "We're leaving," Sarah screamed, grabbing her jacket. They bolted from the room, leaving the board and the chaos behind. Outside, the cold night air felt like a blessing, but Jordan couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed them. The following morning, Jordan woke up to find a text from his sister. It was a photograph of their backyard, taken just hours earlier. In the center of the yard was a shallow hole, freshly dug. "What's going on?" her text read. Jordan's stomach churned. He hadn't told her about the Ouija board, about the message. He called her immediately. "Did you dig that hole?" "What? Of course not. I thought you did." Jordan's blood ran cold. He hung up and stared at the photo. That night, unable to shake the feeling of dread, he returned to his childhood home. Armed with a flashlight and a shovel, he approached the hole. It was larger now, as if someone or something had continued digging. Taking a deep breath, he began to dig. The earth was cold and unyielding, but he pressed on, the flashlight casting eerie shadows across the yard. After what felt like hours, his shovel struck something solid. Heart pounding, he cleared the dirt away to reveal a small wooden box. He hesitated, every instinct screaming at him to stop, but he opened it. Inside was a locket, tarnished and old. He opened it to find a black and white photo of a young girl. Beneath it was a folded piece of paper. Unfolding it, he saw a single word scrawled in shaky handwriting: Karen. A cold wind swept through the yard, and Jordan felt a presence behind him. Turning slowly, he saw her, a pale, spectral figure in a tattered dress, her hollow eyes fixed on him. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice echoing like a distant cry, and then she was gone. Jordan filled in the hole, trembling with every shovelful of dirt. He never spoke of that night to anyone, but from then on, he always felt watched, as though Karen's gratitude came with a price. It was a quiet evening in the winter of 1995, and siblings Claire and Ethan were bored out of their minds. Snow had blanketed their small New England town, cutting them off from friends and the outside world. Their parents were away on a work trip, leaving them alone in the creaky old house they called home. While searching the attic for something to entertain themselves, they stumbled upon a wooden chest tucked in the far corner. Inside, they found a battered Ouija board wrapped in yellowed cloth. "Mom and Dad would kill us if they knew we were playing with this," Ethan said, his voice wavering between excitement and apprehension. Claire smirked. "They're not here, are they? Come on, don't be such a baby." They brought the board downstairs, lit a few candles for atmosphere, and sat cross-legged on the living room floor. The dim light flickered against the walls, casting long, eerie shadows. "Let's do this," Claire said, placing her fingers on the planchette. Ethan reluctantly followed suit. "Is anyone here with us?" Claire asked in a sing-song tone, her bravado masking a kernel of unease. For a few moments, nothing happened. Then the planchette twitched, sliding ever so slightly across the board. "You're moving it," Ethan accused, his voice cracking. "I'm not," Claire shot back, her wide eyes betraying her fear. The planchette spelled out HELO. Ethan swallowed hard. "Who are you?" The response came slowly, methodically. "M-A-R-C? Mark?" Claire repeated. "What do you want?" The planchette glided again. TRAPPED. "Trapped where?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. YOURHOME. The room seemed to grow colder. Claire glanced around, her confidence eroding. "Are you a ghost?" "No," the board replied. "Then what are you?" Claire demanded. The response chilled them to their cores. WACHING. Ethan let go of the planchette and jumped to his feet. "Nope, I'm done. This is freaking me out." But Claire, whether out of defiance or morbid curiosity, kept her hands on the board. "Watching what?" The candles flickered violently, and the planchette moved with a sudden, terrifying speed. YOU. Ethan grabbed Claire's arm. "We need to stop this. Say goodbye." Before they could, the board's letters began lighting up, one by one, as if something unseen was scanning the alphabet. The pointer zipped around wildly, and then it stopped. FROMWALL. "What does that mean?" Claire stammered, her voice quivering. As if in response, a loud thud echoed from the wall behind them. They froze, staring at the plaster as the noise repeated, growing louder, more frantic. "I'm not kidding, Claire. We need to stop this now," Ethan shouted, grabbing the board and slamming it shut. But the thudding didn't stop. It escalated, shaking the floor beneath them. The siblings screamed as cracks began forming in the wall, spidering outwards as if something was trying to claw its way through. Suddenly, the thudding stopped. The silence was deafening, suffocating. Claire and Ethan clung to each other, their breaths shallow. And then a whisper, faint, almost imperceptible, but undeniably close. "I see you." The siblings bolted for the front door, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if the house itself had locked them in. "Upstairs," Claire shouted. They raced up to Claire's room and slammed the door shut, shoving her desk against it. They huddled in the corner, their eyes darting around the room. The air grew thick, oppressive, and the shadows in the corners seemed to writhe and stretch toward them. Ethan noticed something strange on the wall opposite them, a small circular vent they had never paid attention to before. From it came a soft, rasping sound, like someone struggling to breathe. "Claire?" Ethan whispered, pointing at the vent. They both stared, paralyzed with fear, as something began to emerge. Long, pale fingers, gnarled and impossibly thin. A face followed, gaunt and featureless except for deep, hollow eye sockets. The thing squeezed itself through the vent like liquid, its grotesque form defying logic. The siblings screamed. but the creature moved with unnatural speed, skittering across the ceiling like an insect. It dropped down in front of them, its eyeless gaze fixed on their trembling forms. "You called me," it rasped, its voice like dry leaves scraping across pavement. "Now you're mine." The room went black. When Claire and Ethan's parents returned the next day, they found the house eerily silent. The Ouija board lay open on the living room floor, its planchette cracked in two. The siblings were never seen again. To this day, locals claim the house is cursed. Those who have dared to enter report hearing faint whispers and the sound of nails scraping from inside the walls. But none stay long enough to find out who or what is watching. In 1978, on the outskirts of a sleepy Midwestern town, two best friends, Rachel and Emily, decided to stay up late during a thunderstorm. The power was out, and their only source of light was a flickering oil lamp in Emily's basement. They were 13, bored, and looking for excitement. That's when Rachel remembered the Ouija board she'd found in her grandmother's attic. "Let's try it," Rachel said, grinning mischievously as she pulled the old board out of her backpack. Emily hesitated. "I don't know. My mom says those things open doors you can't close." "Your mom also thinks TV melts your brain," Rachel teased. "Come on, it'll be fun." Reluctantly, Emily agreed. They set the board on an old coffee table, their fingers trembling as they rested them on the planchette. "Is anyone here with us?" Rachel asked in a sing-song voice, trying to sound braver than she felt. For a moment there was nothing but the sound of the storm raging outside. Then, ever so slightly, the planchette began to move. "Yes." Emily froze. "Rachel, stop messing around." "I'm not," Rachel hissed. "What's your name?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The planchette slid, hesitating on each letter. Lucy. A chill ran through Emily. "Lucy, what do you want?" The response came faster this time. "HELP. Rachel frowned. "Help with what?" The board spelled SHECOMING. "She's coming," Emily repeated, her hands trembling. "Who's coming?" The planchette moved violently, as if yanked by invisible hands. "MOTER. Rachel scoffed nervously. "Okay, this is weird. Let's stop." But Emily couldn't tear her eyes away. "Why do you need help?" Before the board could respond, the lamp's flame extinguished, plunging the room into darkness. Thunder roared overhead, and in the brief flash of lightning, they both saw it, a pale figure standing at the far end of the basement. "Who's there?" Rachel shouted, her voice cracking. No response. The figure didn't move, but as another bolt of lightning lit the room, they saw it more clearly. It was a woman, her face obscured by a veil, her long, bony fingers clutching a rusted pair of shears. Rachel screamed, grabbing Emily's arm. "We need to go." But the basement door slammed shut and a bone-chilling laughter echoed around them. The woman stepped closer, her movements jerky and unnatural. "Lucy?" Emily stammered. "Is that your mother?" The laughter stopped abruptly, replaced by a guttural growl. The woman raised the shears, and her veil slipped, revealing hollow black pits where her eyes should have been. "She's mine," the figure hissed, her voice dripping with malice. Emily grabbed the Ouija board and hurled it across the room. The planchette skittered across the floor, landing at the woman's feet. "You called me," the figure said, her eyeless gaze locked onto Emily. Rachel pulled Emily toward the stairs, desperate to escape. They pounded on the door, screaming for help, but it wouldn't budge. Behind them, the figure's footsteps grew louder, faster. In a panic, Rachel grabbed the oil lamp and hurled it at the woman. It shattered, igniting a small fire. The flames momentarily illuminated the basement, revealing claw marks etched into the walls and dark, rust-colored stains on the floor. The woman let out an unearthly screech and vanished into the shadows, leaving only the acrid smell of burning hair. The fire spread quickly, and the girls managed to force the door open just in time. They stumbled into the rain-soaked yard, coughing and trembling. The fire department arrived within minutes, but the basement was already a charred ruin. When the firefighters sifted through the wreckage, they found something that made the girls' blood run cold. In the center of the blackened floor was the Ouija board, completely untouched by the flames. The fire chief also discovered an old newspaper clipping hidden in the ashes. It was dated 1923 and featured a photograph of a woman holding a pair of shears. The headline read, "Local woman kills daughter in basement tragedy." Underneath was a single scrawled word in ash, "Mine." Rachel and Emily never spoke of that night again, but for years afterward, Emily swore she heard whispers coming from the shadows whenever she was alone. It was a warm summer night in 1986 when Daniel and his two friends, Chloe and Marcus, gathered at an abandoned house on the edge of town. The place had a sinister reputation, whispered about in school hallways and during campfire tales. It was said to have once belonged to a recluse named Abigail Reed, who disappeared without a trace over 50 years ago. Some said she practiced witchcraft. Others swore her spirit still lingered. Chloe, always the thrill-seeker, pulled a battered Ouija board from her bag. "This is the perfect place to try it," she said, her voice alive with excitement. Marcus groaned. "Do we really have to do this? It's just going to be some creepy coincidence nonsense." "Scared?" Chloe teased. Daniel laughed nervously. "I'm with Marcus on this one. It's a dumb game." "Then what's the harm?" Chloe shot back, already setting up the board on the dusty floor. The others exchanged uneasy glances but joined her. The room was silent except for the creak of the old wooden walls. They lit a few candles, their flickering light casting distorted shadows. As they placed their fingers on the planchette, Chloe grinned. "Let's find Abigail." "Is anyone here with us?" Chloe asked. At first, there was nothing. Then the planchette jerked slightly, moving to yes. Marcus yanked his hands away. "Nope, someone's messing with it." "Nobody's messing with it," Chloe said, though her voice wavered slightly. "Let's keep going." Daniel's palms were slick with sweat. "Who are we talking to?" The planchette began to move, slow and deliberate. "A Bigail." Chloe's eyes widened. "Abigail Reed, the woman who lived here?" "Yes." Daniel felt the temperature in the room drop. He rubbed his arms as a chill crept through him. "What happened to you?" "Killed," the board replied. Marcus leaned back, his eyes darting to the dark corners of the room. "I don't like this, Chloe. Let's stop." Chloe ignored him. "Who killed you?" The planchette moved faster now, almost frantic. "Heishere." "He's here?" Daniel repeated, his voice cracking. Suddenly the candles blew out, plunging the room into darkness. "What the hell was that?" Marcus yelled, scrambling to find his flashlight. Before he could turn it on, they heard a loud, deliberate knock coming from the ceiling above them. "Did you hear that?" Chloe whispered. "Of course I heard it," Marcus snapped, fumbling with his flashlight. He finally switched it on, casting a pale beam of light around the room. The knocking grew louder, moving across the ceiling as if someone or something was crawling just above them. "Let's get out of here," Daniel shouted, standing up. But as they moved toward the door, it slammed shut with a force that shook the walls. They screamed, pounding on the door, but it wouldn't budge. The knocking stopped, and then a voice. Low, guttural, and impossibly close. "Leave, or suffer," Chloe whimpered, clutching Daniel's arm. "We're trying to leave." The Ouija board, forgotten on the floor, began to rattle violently. The planchette moved on its own, spelling out SUFFER. The temperature in the room dropped further, their breath visible in the dim flashlight beam. From the corner of the room came a sound that made their blood freeze, a wet, dragging noise like something heavy being pulled across the floor. "Marcus," Daniel whispered, "point the light over there." Marcus turned the flashlight toward the corner, revealing a figure, hunched in the shadows. It was a man, his face pale and stretched unnaturally, his eyes wide and unblinking. Blood dripped from his fingers, and his mouth twisted into a grotesque grin. Who are you?" Chloe stammered. The man didn't answer. He stepped forward, dragging something behind him, a rusted axe, its blade coated with blackened blood. "Run!" Daniel screamed, shoving the others toward the window. They frantically tried to pry it open, but it was stuck. Behind them, the man's footsteps grew louder, heavier. "Break it!" Marcus yelled, grabbing a chair and slamming it against the glass. The window shattered, and they scrambled through, cutting their hands and legs on the jagged edges. As they tumbled onto the overgrown lawn, they turned back toward the house. The figure stood in the broken window, staring at them with unblinking eyes. He raised a single finger to his lips, as if to shush them, before slowly retreating into the darkness. The house seemed to sigh, the sound of creaking wood echoing like a final warning. The three of them ran without looking back, their hearts pounding. When they reached the main road, they stopped to catch their breath. "We're never going back there," Marcus said, his voice shaking. "Agreed," Chloe whispered, tears streaming down her face. But Daniel wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed on his hands, which were trembling uncontrollably. There, carved deep into his palm, were the words, "You will return." In 1993, college roommates Anna, Megan, and Liz decided to spend Halloween in an old farmhouse just outside their small Vermont town. The place was notorious for being haunted, and locals avoided it. But the trio, fueled by cheap wine and a taste for thrill-seeking, thought it would be the perfect spot for some Halloween fun. Megan, always the instigator, brought an old Ouija board she had found at a thrift store earlier that week. It was worn, with faded letters and strange symbols that didn't match the typical board designs. "This thing looks ancient," Anna said, eyeing it warily. "That's the point," Megan replied, grinning. "If we're going to contact a ghost, it might as well be here, right?" Liz hesitated. "I don't know, guys. What if this actually works?" Anna laughed nervously. "It's just a game. Let's humor Megan and then watch a movie." They sat cross-legged on the dusty wooden floor, the wind howling outside the broken windows. With candles scattered around them, their shadows danced eerily on the cracked walls. "Is anyone here with us?" Megan asked, her fingers on the planchette. At first, nothing happened. Then the planchette began to move. "Yes." Liz gasped, pulling her hands back. "Okay, who's messing with it?" "Nobody," Megan said, her grin fading. Anna frowned. "Fine. Who are you?" The planchette moved slowly, spelling out Elise. "Elise," Megan repeated. "What happened to you?" The response was immediate. "TRAPPE'd. Liz shivered. "Trapped where?" The planchette moved again, more erratically this time. WALL. "Wall," Anna said, her voice trembling. "What does that mean?" The air grew heavy, and the temperature dropped sharply. The candles flickered wildly, and a faint scratching sound echoed from somewhere in the house. "Do you hear that?" Liz whispered, her eyes wide. The scratching grew louder, seeming to come from the wall directly behind them. "Maybe it's just an animal," Anna suggested, though her voice betrayed her fear. "Ask her what she wants," Megan said, her bravado faltering. "What do you want, Elise?" Anna asked. The planchette shot to a single word, H-E-Elp. The scratching turned into pounding, as though someone or something was desperately trying to break through. "I think we should stop," Liz said, standing up. But before anyone could move, the candles blew out, plunging them into darkness. The pounding stopped abruptly, replaced by a soft, chilling whisper. "I'm here." Megan scrambled for her flashlight, but as she flicked it on, the beam illuminated something horrifying. A pale, bloodless hand was protruding from a crack in the wall. It twitched, the fingers curling and uncurling as though grasping for something or someone. Liz screamed, backing away, but the hand began to push further out, followed by a face. The woman's features were grotesque. Her skin was stretched tight over her skull, and her eyes were black voids. "Help me," the figure croaked, her voice distorted and broken. "Run," Anna shouted, grabbing Liz's arm. They bolted for the door, but it slammed shut on its own, the force shaking the floorboards. The figure emerged fully from the wall, dragging her broken body toward them. "You can't leave," she hissed. "Not now. Not ever." Megan grabbed the Ouija board and hurled it at the figure. It shattered into pieces, and the house erupted in a deafening roar. The walls seemed to breathe, the floor buckled, and the air filled with an unbearable stench. "Over here!" Anna yelled, pointing to a broken window. They dove through, shards of glass slicing their skin as they tumbled onto the cold, damp grass. Behind them, the house groaned, and they turned just in time to see the figure standing in the window, her empty eyes fixed on them. Her mouth opened unnaturally wide, and a scream that sounded like 1,000 voices erupted, sending them running into the woods. The next morning, the farmhouse had collapsed into a pile of rubble. But when the police investigated, they found no signs of Megan, Anna, or Liz having been there. No footprints, no broken glass, no candle wax. The only thing left intact was the Ouija board, sitting in the center of the wreckage with the planchette spelling out, "Still here." In the fall of 2001, college students Sarah, Jake, and Linda decided to celebrate Halloween with an overnight stay in an abandoned asylum that had been shuttered for decades. The building, known as Black Hollow Sanitarium, was infamous for the mysterious disappearance of several patients and staff in the 1950s. Local legends claimed the place was cursed, but that only made it more alluring to the trio. Linda, always eager to up the stakes, pulled a vintage Ouija board from her bag as they set up camp in the asylum's decrepit common room. The air smelled of mildew and rot, and the only light came from the lanterns they brought with them. "This is going to be epic," Linda said, grinning as she set the board on the floor. Jake frowned. "Do we really need to do this? This place already gives me the creeps." "Exactly why we should do it," Linda shot back. "What's the worst that could happen?" Sarah hesitated. "I don't know, guys. Maybe we shouldn't mess with this stuff. Linda rolled her eyes. Come on, it's just a piece of wood. They lit a few candles and placed their fingers on the planchette. The room felt unnervingly quiet, as though the building itself was holding its breath. Is anyone here with us? Linda asked, her voice loud in the silence. The planchette remained still for several seconds. Then it began to move, gliding to yes. Jake stiffened. One of you moved it. Linda grinned mischievously. Wasn't me. Who are you? Sarah asked cautiously. The board spelled out D-O-C-T-O-R. Doctor? Linda repeated, her grin faltering. Doctor who? The planchette began moving faster. A-E-N-R-I. Jake's eyes widened. Dr. Henry Matthews? Wasn't he the head doctor here? The one who went missing? The board responded, Y-E-S. A chill settled over the room. Sarah glanced around nervously. Why are you still here? The reply came slowly, deliberately. E-V-I-L. Evil? Jake whispered. What evil? The candles flickered violently, and a deep, guttural groan echoed from somewhere in the building. What the hell was that? Linda said, her bravado gone. The planchette moved again, faster this time. I-T-C-O-M-E-S. The room suddenly grew cold, their breath visible in the dim candlelight. The groan turned into a dragging sound, like heavy footsteps shuffling down a distant hallway. Jake stood up, his hands shaking. We need to leave, now. But before they could move, the candles went out, plunging them into darkness. Turn on the lanterns, Sarah shouted. Jake fumbled with his lantern, its weak light finally flickering to life. The beam revealed the doorway to the hallway, and a figure standing there. It was tall, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, its eyes reflecting the lantern light like an animal's. The figure took a slow, deliberate step forward, dragging one leg behind it. Who's there? Jake yelled, his voice cracking. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it raised a hand, its fingers unnaturally long and ending in sharp, blackened nails. We have to run, Sarah screamed, grabbing Linda's arm. But as they turned to flee, the door behind them slammed shut with a deafening crash. The sound of chains rattling echoed through the room, and the Ouija board began to shake violently. The planchette flew off the board, hitting the wall with a sharp crack. Stay, a low, gravelly voice whispered, coming from everywhere and nowhere. The figure was closer now, its face partially illuminated by the lantern. It wasn't human. Its skin was gray and mottled. Its mouth stretched into a grotesque grin that revealed jagged yellow teeth. Jake threw the lantern at it in a panic. The glass shattered and flames erupted, briefly lighting the room. In the flickering light, they saw dozens of other figures emerging from the shadows, their faces twisted and broken, their bodies contorted in horrifying ways. Screaming, the trio bolted for the only open window, climbing through and falling into the overgrown courtyard below. They didn't stop running until they reached the main road, their lungs burning and their ears ringing with phantom whispers. When they finally looked back, the asylum stood silent and dark, as though nothing had happened. But as they caught their breath, Sarah noticed something on her arm. Burned into her skin in precise letters were the words, "You can't escape." None of them ever spoke about that night again, but they each carried the same scar. And sometimes late at night, they would hear faint knocking at their doors, as though something had followed them home. In the winter of 1998, a young woman named Claire inherited an old Victorian home from a distant relative she had never met. The house was nestled in a remote, foggy part of Maine, surrounded by barren trees and miles of desolation. The locals warned her that the house had a dark history, but Claire, eager for a fresh start, dismissed their cryptic warnings. On her second night in the house, Claire discovered an antique Ouija board hidden in a chest in the attic. Its ornate design and worn edges hinted at its age. She decided to keep it as a decorative piece, but had no intention of using it. That night, as the wind howled outside, Claire sat alone in the parlor, reading. She was startled when a loud thud echoed from the attic. Gripping a flashlight, she climbed the creaky stairs to investigate. Nothing seemed out of place, but the Ouija board, which she had left in the corner, now rested in the middle of the floor in refrenyai, the planchette balanced perfectly on top. Thinking she must have knocked it over earlier, Claire returned it to its spot. As she turned to leave, the planchette slid across the board on its own. Her heart raced. It spelled Hello. Claire froze. Hello? She whispered, her voice trembling. The planchette moved again. Play. No, she said aloud, backing away. Suddenly, the door to the attic slammed shut, and the flashlight flickered. The room plunged into darkness. Claire felt a cold breath on her neck and a faint whisper, too low to understand. She screamed, bolting down the stairs and locking the attic door behind her. She told herself it was her imagination, a trick of the wind and her nerves. But over the next few nights, things escalated. She woke to find furniture rearranged, strange symbols scratched into the wallpaper, and the persistent sound of whispers coming from the attic. Desperate for answers, Claire decided to confront the board. She set it on the dining table, lit a single candle, and placed her trembling fingers on the planchette. "What do you want?" she demanded. The planchette moved slowly. Free. Free from what? It spelled THEM. Before she could ask another question, the candle blew out and the room grew icy. A guttural voice boomed from the shadows. "You cannot save her." Claire turned to see a figure in the corner of the room, a woman in a tattered dress, her face pale and her eyes hollow. "Help me," the woman whispered, reaching out with skeletal fingers. But behind her, a darker figure loomed. Its form was massive, its eyes burning like embers. It placed a clawed hand on the woman's shoulder and pulled her back into the darkness. The Ouija board began to shake violently. The planchette moved in erratic circles before spelling out RUN. Claire didn't hesitate. She grabbed her coat and fled the house, driving into town and refusing to return. The next day, she contacted a local historian, desperate to learn about the house's past. He revealed that the house once belonged to a spiritualist who conducted seances in the late 1800s. One session had gone terribly wrong, and several people died under mysterious circumstances. The spiritualist disappeared shortly after, leaving behind only whispers of what had been unleashed. Claire never returned to the house, but weeks later she received a package with no return address. Inside was the Ouija board, with a single word burned into the wood: waiting. In the fall of 2003, two best friends, Jenna and Callie, were looking for a thrill. They had heard rumors about a place called Widow's Cradle, an abandoned orphanage in their town, long condemned and forgotten. According to legend, the headmistress, a woman named Eleanor Price, was a cruel disciplinarian who had turned to dark rituals to control her charges. Over the years, the children disappeared one by one until no one remained but Eleanor, and she vanished too. The building had been boarded up ever since, but that didn't stop the curious from sneaking in. Most returned with wild tales of footsteps, whispers, and shadows moving where no one should be. "Let's see if it's real," Jenna said, pulling a dusty Ouija board from her grandmother's attic. Callie was hesitant, but didn't want to seem scared. "Okay, but we don't stay long." That evening, they made their way to Widow's Cradle, armed with flashlights and the Ouija board. The orphanage loomed in the darkness, its windows like empty eyes and its doors chained shut. They found a broken window near the back and climbed in, landing in what used to be a dining hall. The room was cold, far colder than the crisp autumn air outside. Broken furniture and shattered dishes littered the floor, and a musty stench hung in the air. Jenna cleared a space on the floor and set the board down. "Let's do this." "I'm not sure about this," Callie muttered, glancing around nervously. "Don't chicken out now," Jenna said, lighting a single candle. They placed their fingers on the planchette. "Is anyone here with us?" Jenna asked. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the planchette moved to "Yes." Callie snatched her hands away. "You're doing that." "I swear I'm not," Jenna insisted, her eyes wide. "Who are you?" Callie asked reluctantly, putting her fingers back on the planchette. It spelled Eleanor. Jenna smirked nervously. "Eleanor Price, the headmistress?" "Yes." "What happened to you?" The response came slowly, almost hesitantly. "Theytookme. "Who took you?" Callie whispered. The board spelled Children. The room seemed to grow darker, the candle's flame flickering wildly. "That's enough," Callie said, her voice shaking. But Jenna pressed on. "Why did they take you?" The planchette jerked violently, spelling out SHECOMES. Before they could react, a loud crash echoed from upstairs. It sounded like footsteps, heavy and deliberate, moving across the floor above them. "Someone's here," Callie whispered, her grip tightening on Jenna's arm. "No one's here. It's just the wind," Jenna said, though her voice betrayed her fear. The footsteps grew louder, descending the staircase at the far end of the hall. "Blow out the candle," Callie hissed. Jenna did, plunging them into near total darkness. They crouched behind an overturned table, their breaths shallow. The footsteps stopped. Then came a voice, soft and childlike, echoing through the room. "Miss Price? Are you here?" The girls froze. Another voice answered, this one cold and sharp. "They are not ready yet." Jenna grabbed Callie's arm, whispering, "We need to get out of here." But as they moved, their flashlight beam flickered, revealing the figure of a woman standing at the edge of the room. She wore a tattered black dress, her face pale and gaunt, her eyes sunk in pits of darkness. "You shouldn't have come," the woman said, her voice low and hollow. Callie screamed, but before they could run, shadows began to slither from the corners of the room, twisting and writhing like living things. They reached for the girls, cold and clammy, pulling at their arms and legs. "Leave," the woman roared, her voice echoing like a clap of thunder. The shadows released them, and the girls scrambled out the way they came, falling onto the cold, damp ground outside. When they looked back, the orphanage was silent, its windows dark. But in one of the upper windows, they saw a group of small figures staring down at them. Children, their faces pale and blank, their eyes black voids. They ran until their legs gave out, swearing never to return. The next morning, Jenna found the Ouija board in her bedroom, even though she had left it behind. The planchette was resting on a single word. In the summer of 2010, 4 friends, Ethan, Mia, Harper, and Tyler, decided to spend a weekend at an old cabin deep in the woods of Oregon. The cabin belonged to Ethan's late uncle, who had lived as a recluse for decades before vanishing under mysterious circumstances. The cabin had sat untouched for years, its dusty interior still filled with his belongings. On their first night, as they explored the cabin, they discovered an ancient, hand-carved Ouija board hidden in a secret compartment beneath the floorboards. It was unlike any board they had seen before, the letters etched into dark, splintered wood and the planchette adorned with strange, jagged symbols. "This is creepy as hell," Mia said, holding it up. "That's the point," Harper replied, smirking. "Let's see if it works." Ethan hesitated. "I don't know. My uncle wasn't exactly normal. He was into weird stuff." "All the more reason to try it," Tyler said. "Come on, it's just a game." Reluctantly, they all gathered around the coffee table, lit a few candles, and placed their fingers on the planchette. "Is anyone here with us?" Harper asked, her voice light but tinged with nervousness. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the planchette twitched, moving slowly to, "Yes." "Very funny," Ethan said, glaring at Tyler. "It wasn't me," Tyler insisted. "Who are you?" Mia asked. The planchette moved deliberately, spelling REVL. "What does that mean?" Harper asked, her brow furrowed. "Maybe it's a name," Tyler suggested. "Where are you?" Ethan asked. The answer came quickly. HERE. The candles flickered, and a cold breeze swept through the room, even though all the windows were shut. "Okay, that's enough," Mia said, pulling her hands away. But the planchette kept moving on its own, spelling DONTSTOP. Harper laughed nervously. "This is getting weird. Let's just put it away," Ethan said, reaching for the board. Before he could touch it, the planchette shot across the board, spelling out YOUWILSEE. A loud thud echoed from upstairs. "What was that?" Mia whispered, her voice trembling. Tyler stood, grabbing a flashlight. "Probably just the house settling." They all followed him cautiously, the wooden stairs creaking under their weight. The air upstairs was even colder, and the long hallway stretched into darkness. "Let's just check and get out of here," Ethan muttered. They reached the end of the hall, where a large locked door stood. The lock looked old and rusted, but as they approached, it clicked open on its own. Inside was a small, windowless room, empty except for a large mirror leaning against the wall. Its surface was tarnished and smeared, but as they stepped closer, they realized the reflection was wrong. In the mirror, the room appeared crowded with shadowy figures. Dozens of them. "I'm done. We're leaving," Mia said, backing away. Before anyone could move, the mirror rattled violently, and one of the figures stepped forward. It pressed its hand against the glass, and the surface rippled like water. The hand pushed through. Screaming, they ran back downstairs, but the cabin seemed to change around them. The hallway stretched impossibly long, the doors they had passed earlier now gone. "Where's the front door?" Tyler yelled, panic in his voice. "It was right here," Ethan shouted. The air grew heavy, and a low, guttural growl echoed from all around them. The shadows from the mirror were no longer confined. They were spilling into the cabin, crawling along the walls and ceiling like living ink. "Get to the back window," Harper shouted, pointing toward the kitchen. They scrambled toward it, the shadows slithering closer. Tyler broke the glass with a chair, and one by one, they climbed out into the night, They didn't stop running until they reached the car parked down the dirt road. But as Ethan fumbled with the keys, Mia gasped. In the rearview mirror, the cabin loomed behind them, and in every window, shadowy figures stared back. Ethan started the car, and they sped away. The next morning, they returned with the police, determined to prove what had happened. But when they arrived, the cabin was gone. Only a patch of scorched earth remained, as if it had never been there. Later, Ethan found the Ouija board in his backpack, though he had left it behind. The planchette rested on one word, return.